Welcome back to Hot Air with me, Joshua Robert. And this week, we are going to dive into a conversation that I was not planning on having. I had a completely different episode planned until this morning. This episode actually started because of one story. I came across the heartbreaking case of 18-year-old Nolan Xavier Wells. And like so many people online, I found myself going down the rabbit hole, trying to understand exactly what happened. And if you haven't heard about it, I will do a quick little recap. But somewhere between reading articles, watching interviews, and scrolling through thousands of comments, I realized the conversation that I wanted to have wasn't actually about solving the case. It was about something much bigger. But let me tell you how I got there, okay? Let's connect the dots because I think this makes sense, so stick with me. At first, I was like, I'm just going to cover this case because I am the type of person that can relate to inequalities. I think that's the word. And I guess in this specific case, I feel like I can relate to people who experience racism only because I'm a minority as well, a part of a minority group, the gay community, if you're not aware, if you can't tell. And we experience homophobia often. So when cases like this come up, like Trey Reed. If you've been listening for a while, I did an episode about Trey Reed, who was found hanging from a tree at Delta State University, and it was marked as a suicide. But the family got their own private autopsy done, and then the case kind of spiraled from there. And there was a lot of things pointing to the fact that this was not a suicide. And when a black man is found hanging from a tree, some people look the other way, and some people look at it and go, that is a tale as old as time, and also some fucking bullshit. And just to wipe the slate clean and be like, oh, suicide without even investigating seems very unfair for lack of a better way of explaining it. So I originally was just going to focus on this new case that was very similar to Trey Reed. Then, as I started doing my research, I came across a bunch of other cases over the last few years of men and women of color who have been wrongfully killed by either the police, and it was written off as self-defense by the police, or they were quite literally found hanging from trees multiple times in the South, and it was marked as a suicide. So I go my heart wants to talk about this, right? Like my soul, my conscience can't just ignore that and then continue into birthday month episodes. Like I just can't do it. Because if you recall from last episode, I said I was going to be talking about birthday related positive things this month, which, we will get back to assuming nothing else crazy happens. But I was talking to my boyfriend this morning, literally hours ago before I start recording this, and just talking about the themes and the topics that we hit on. And I'm just like, this one really is kind of out of left field. It's not aligned with the themes of the podcast in the sense that it is not a queer story. It is not queer history, but it's something that I still care about. And then so he was talking to me, and honestly, he really pieced together this friggin' mystery board in my head that had all the red threads connecting here and there. And I was like, I can still talk about this case, but let's bring in the racism that is experienced within the queer community that I've touched on before, and how a lot of people turn a blind eye when other LGBTQ plus people of color are looked at as other because of their skin. And then anyway, the ball got rolling. We're going to get to where this ball rolled eventually. But in my head, this all makes sense because it's really not something I can just go, oh, that happened and I don't care, because I do care. And also some things I'm going to say today are probably, I'm going to be very careful the way that I do express myself and the things that I say, because I don't want them to be taken the wrong way, or I also don't want to say something that is fucking racist. That's not the point of this podcast and this episode. There's other bullshit podcasts out there where you can go find some racist white ass motherfuckers talking about this case and talking shit about this boy and his family, but that is not what this is about. So after sitting down and brainstorming and really kind of trying to think about how I can bring this back to what Hot Air is actually about, I had to stop and ask myself a question that we don't ask enough, clearly, inside of the queer community. And that is the LGBTQ plus community really as inclusive as we would love to believe that it is? Because I'm always like, I'm gay. Every gay person must, not be a racist because I'm not a racist, but that ain't the truth, okay? We proudly wave rainbow flags. We tell the world that love is love. We celebrate diversity, acceptance, and belonging. But if we're being completely honest with ourselves, are we always practicing what we preach? So today, we're talking about the racism in queer spaces, racial bias on dating apps, beauty standards, representation, performative allyship, and the uncomfortable conversations that many of us, including myself, have probably been avoiding for far too long. Now, before anyone starts drafting strongly worded Instagram comments, send them anyway. But before you start drafting them, let me just be very, very, very clear about one thing. This episode is not about attacking the queer community. Obviously, I love the queer community. It's given me friendships and opportunities and confidence in a place where I finally feel like I belong. But I also believe that if we genuinely love something, we should care enough to challenge it, and especially when it falls short. So growth doesn't happen because everyone agrees with each other. It happens because someone is willing to ask the uncomfortable questions that everyone else is quietly thinking, but too much of a pussy to speak about. Okay, and here's my challenge for you for this listen today. Resist the urge to become defensive and instead just remain curious. You do not have to agree with everything that I say. In fact, there are going to be moments where you disagree with me completely. I am sure of it. But I also hope that you ask yourself why you disagree with me. Because this episode isn't about assigning blame. I think it might be, but it's an episode about self-reflection and accountability and asking whether we can become the community that we are so often telling the world that we already are. We're not there, people. And before we jump in, make sure you're following me on Instagram and TikTok at _hotairpod. Visit my website, hotairwithjoshuarobert.com, where you can submit your listener stories, topic suggestions, and shop my merch. All right, with that being said, maybe it didn't make sense what I said, but it will, okay? I think let's have the conversation that some people are probably wishing I was not about to have, okay? Let's hit it. HOTAIR, hot takes therapy, no filter, say what I mean. HOTAIR, let's be real, you're listening to Hot Air. Part 1, the story that changed my episode. Or the story that was going to be my episode, but then changed my episode. Okay. Again, I wasn't planning on making this episode. Seriously, the entire lineup was a completely different topic. Everything was done. Honestly, the notes were done. The script was done. I was feeling good about it. And then I opened, and then I had that conversation in the morning with my boyf, and everything completely shifted. I was like, I really need to reel this in. I need to stay true to the podcast. There's other podcasts out there that are going to be doing the type of work that I want to be doing with this episode, and people that probably know better than me. And I still went down the rabbit hole, though, okay? I still went on all the TikToks and the threads and the Instagram reels and all of the tweets or X or whatever the fuck you call it nowadays, and read into all of the details about this specific case. And that was the case of 18-year-old Nolan Xavier Wells. And we're going to touch on it briefly because I still think it's important, but it's not going to take up the whole episode. Not because it's not important, but because there's other people that will do it justice, do it better than I. If you can't tell, I'm like already uncomfortable because of all the things we're going to talk about today. I'm also very sweaty. So at first, I did what we all do. I watched a 30-second video. I thought, wow, that's like awful what happened to him. And I kept scrolling. But then his face kept showing up, TikTok after TikTok, Instagram reels everywhere, like on my YouTube, every single solitary news channel or true crime channel is talking about it. His family is begging for information. People are demanding answers. And before I knew it, I had a gazillion browser tabs open. My coffee was cold, and I was 3 hours deep into reading everything I could find, not just about him, but other people of color, Black people, that this has happened to. And I thought I was researching just one case at first. And instead, I found myself asking a much bigger question, like, why did this story hit me so differently like it has before? Because if I'm being honest, obviously, I didn't know Nolan. I wasn't there. I don't know what happened on Horn Island that day. Neither do you, unless you were there. Neither does TikTok. And that's actually what makes this story so fascinating and so uncomfortable. And for anyone who hasn't followed the story and what's going on, here is what we know now. Nolan Xavier Wells was 18 years old. He had recently graduated from high school. He was preparing for college, and by all accounts, was exactly the kind of kid that every parent hopes that they raise. Friends describe him as kind and respectful, funny and driven. And on the 4th of July, he traveled with a group of friends to Horn Island, a remote barrier island off the Mississippi Gulf Coast. It always happens in Mississippi, doesn't it? And at some point during the day, Nolan disappeared. The people that he was with returned to the mainland without him. So his family reported him missing after he never came home, and a massive search began involving local authorities, the Coast Guard, volunteers, helicopters, boats, like the works. Everyone was looking for him. And 2 days later, searchers recovered Nolan's body near the island. And as I record this right now, investigators have not publicly released a final cause and manner of death, and the investigation is still ongoing. That could change by the time this comes out. And those are the facts. That's like everything, like that's all we know. Everything else beyond that exists somewhere on a spectrum between unanswered questions, eyewitness accounts, like online speculation, outright misinformation, and that's where we need to be very careful. But there is a lot of speculation because he was with a group of all white boys around his age. And here's what social media does better than almost anything else. It convinces us that watching 50 videos somehow makes us an expert. And like we've all done that. One creator says one thing, another stitches it to something else. Someone claims they have inside information. Someone zooms in on a blurry screenshot, uses AI to enhance it. And suddenly people are speaking with like absolute certainty about events that they were not present for. And straight up, that's what I was going to do this episode. I was going to go down the conspiracy route. I was going to dive into how multiple sources are saying that he was murdered by these white boys. There was an argument and they lashed out, and it was like these 10 white guys against one black boy. And in the South, that is concerning. And thank God my boyfriend talked me out of it, because that is like a dangerous place to get into. Not because people should ask questions. Obviously we should, but because questions and conclusions are not the same thing. We live in a world where people have forgotten the difference between those two things. You can say like, something about this doesn't sit right with me, and that is fair. You can say, I hope investigators are thorough. Usually they're not in the South when it has to do with people that are not white, but it's also a fair statement. But jumping from uncertainty to certainty without evidence doesn't help anyone, especially this boy's family. So we're not going to go there. But like, here's where I do find this interesting, along with many other stories that are so familiar. I'm just always so curious as to why these types of stories spread so quickly. I feel like I know why, but like, why did millions of people immediately assume that they could not trust the investigation? Like, think about that. Like, before an autopsy was complete, before investigators finished any interviews, before toxicology reports, before most people even knew where Horn Island was on a map, millions of people had already decided that whatever the official conclusion ended up being, they probably were not going to believe it. And that is a really profound thing when you stop and think about it. And honestly, I obviously don't think that reaction came out of nowhere, because the truth is that trust isn't built with one investigation. It is built or destroyed over decades, because Black Americans have watched generations of cases where families felt ignored, where investigations were mishandled, where evidence was questioned, where justice took years or never came at all. Whether you're talking about the civil rights era, police brutality, unsolved murders, or countless stories that never became national headlines, there is a long history that shapes how communities respond today. So when people say, why doesn't everyone just wait for the investigation to like conclude? Like, obviously I understand that sentiment, but I also understand why trust isn't automatically there for everyone. Trust is earned, and history has taught many people that asking questions isn't cynicism, it is simple survival. And at the same time, I think we still have to be careful not to let skepticism become certainty, but that's very, very hard. It's easy to assume the worst when the worst has been shown to you. Like, obviously, if the investigation ultimately concludes that Nolan drowned, then investigators owe the public a thorough explanation backed by evidence. I mean, it doesn't matter how he died. We need an explanation. If new evidence points in a different direction, then they owe the public an explanation too. Like, what justice looks like isn't deciding what happened before the facts are known. Justice is following the evidence where it leads, but the evidence isn't always followed when a Black boy is found dead after hanging out with a bunch of white boys who have fathers that are in the justice system, police, and judges. And whatever the truth is, obviously Nolan and his family deserve the truth. But here is the part that completely changed what this episode was going to be for me. So as I kept reading those comments online, I noticed something. Well, obviously, I went down the rabbit hole. So I noticed something down the comment rabbit hole that bothered me. People were saying if this had been a white college student, every major news network would be covering it for 24 hours a day. Think about how many missing white women have dominated national headlines for weeks, sometimes months. Think about the documentaries, the podcasts, the primetime specials. Now ask yourself this. How many missing Black teenagers can you name? Not many. How many Black victims have become household names? Like, I don't ask that to diminish anyone else's tragedy. It's a tragedy when people are murdered and disappear. Like, loss is loss, but media attention has never been distributed equally. There is even a name for it. Missing white woman syndrome. And researchers and journalists have documented for years how race, gender, age, and socioeconomic status can influence which victims receive sustained media coverage. And while Nolan's case was being covered very heavily, it has certainly died down. And that should make us all a bit uncomfortable. And then something else hit me that made me close my laptop for a hot minute and take a hot breath. I spend a lot of time talking about discrimination against LGBTQ plus people on this podcast. We've talked about politicians targeting our community. We have talked about homophobia and transphobia, mental health, bullying, body image, internalized shame. We have had those conversations because they matter. But sitting there reading about Nolan, I had to ask myself something that I don't think I've asked nearly enough. Where are we in this conversation? Not society, not politicians, not straight people, like us, the queer community, the LGBTQ plus community. Where are we in this conversation? And that's when I was like, how do I tie this all together? Because we love telling the world that we are inclusive. We love saying everyone belongs. We wave our rainbow flags. We put love is love in our bios. We celebrate Pride every June. And we tell ourselves that because we have experienced discrimination, that we are naturally better at recognizing it when it happens to someone else. But are we? Like, really, are we? Because, again, if I'm being completely honest, I don't think we are. And that realization is what this episode then became about. It wasn't just about Nolan Wells, not just one single investigation, but something that is so much bigger that I think we have been avoiding for far too long. And I've touched on it in other episodes, yet I was a little nervous to dig deeper. And this was a year ago when I put out that episode about internalized homophobia. And I did touch on body image and racism. And I got some comments that were like, why did you brush over that? Or why didn't you talk about that more? And in my defense, that episode was specific to internalized homophobia. And I did respond to those. And I was like, I think I should leave that for a person of color to talk about. But I guess just like I want people to be an ally for the queer community, why can't I be an ally for the Black queer community as well, right? Or the Asian queer community or the Hispanic queer community, like anyone who's not white. Like, why can't we all just support each other? So let's talk about race inside of our own community. Part 2. We love saying love is love, but ... Now, one of the things I love most about being part of the queer community is that we've built this identity around acceptance. It is practically our brand. We wave our rainbow flags, as I said. We tell people to just show up as you are. We wear these t-shirts that say love is love. Pride is such a kick-ass celebration every single year. It transforms Instagram into the gay Olympics of virtue signaling. And every corporation used to have a rainbow logo. Lots of influencers post those inspirational quotes about inclusion, and every company suddenly remembers that we exist and throws up a flag and then takes it down. But nothing says equality like a limited edition rainbow vodka bottle, doesn't it? We tell ourselves, and honestly, we tell the world, that we are the community that welcomes everyone. We are the safe space. We are the ones who know what it feels like to be judged, rejected, bullied, kicked out of our homes, denied rights, or told that we do not belong. We've experienced that pain firsthand. So naturally, you would think we'd be the last people to turn around and make someone else feel like they don't belong. Right? Right? Mm, so many question marks. Like, see, that's the version of our community that we love to advertise, as mentioned above. It's polished, it is colorful, it's easy to put on a billboard. But I think if we are being brutally honest with ourselves, and that's what this podcast is about, brutal reality, that version that we promote isn't always the reality. Because here's what I've noticed over the years. We are phenomenal at calling out discrimination when it's aimed at us. Somebody says something homophobic. We are fucking on it. A politician introduces an anti-LGBTQ plus bill. We mobilize overnight and we are reading them in the comment section. Someone gets fired for being gay. We flood social media demanding accountability. And that is good. We should. Those things matter. But the second someone says, like, hey, I've experienced racism in queer spaces, it's like the entire room forgets how listening even works. Like, everyone gets defensive and they're like, well, I've never seen that. The gay community isn't racist. We're all minorities. We're all oppressed. Like, okay, and what? Since when did experiencing one form of discrimination magically make us incapable of participating in another? And I'm going to throw myself under the bus here. I am sure there are times when I have done and said things that are racist. It is ingrained in us culturally as white people. We learn from our grandparents and our parents. And sometimes we don't even realize we're saying and doing these things. Sometimes we don't even know what microaggressions are. So I am sure that I have done and said things in the past, like, honestly, like, without even noticing it, right? And last time I checked, being gay doesn't automatically uninstall every bias that you've learned growing up. Some of us learned much different things than the other, but like, I wish it did. I wish being gay just absolved you of that and made our eyes open. Like, it would save us a lot of therapy. And can we please stop acting like the queer community is some magical utopia where prejudice simply doesn't exist? Like, have you fucking met gay men? I say that with love because I am one and I love gay men. But like, let's be fucking real for a sec. We can't even agree on whether pineapple belongs on pizza without threatening to block each other or like jump each other in the parking lot. This is the same community that invented labels for literally everything. Twink, bear, otter, jock, daddy, pup, muscle, mask, femme, clean, discreet, DL, no fats, no femmes, no this, no that. We have categorized ourselves into so many little boxes that IKEA is asking us to calm the fuck down. We're running out of boxes here, people. So why are we so shocked when race ends up becoming another one of those boxes? Like, we shouldn't be. It doesn't mean everyone is racist. What it means is we're human, and humans have biases that are incorrect, and the difference is whether we are willing to admit it. And frankly, a lot of us are not. I also think we've become addicted to looking inclusive instead of actually doing the work of being inclusive. There is a very big difference. Pride has become incredibly marketable. And don't get me wrong, I love Pride. I will never stop celebrating it. But somewhere along the way, we started confusing visibility with progress. Like, it's easy to wave your rainbow flag and it's easy to repost something and like say everyone is welcome here. It's easy to throw a drag queen on a corporate float once a fucking year. What's harder is asking ourselves uncomfortable questions about our own behavior. Who do we invite into our friend groups? Who do we follow online? Who do we date? Who do we ignore? Who do we assume we'd have nothing in common with before even introducing ourselves? Those aren't questions that a rainbow fucking logo can answer. And here's where I started feeling a little bit called out myself while researching this episode. I obviously kept thinking about Nolan Wells because that's where this conversation started. I kept thinking about how quickly I became invested in his story. And then I asked myself, like, why haven't I spent this much time learning about other stories involving Black communities? Why did this one stop me? Was it because the algorithm decided this was the story that I should see? Like, probably because it was also kind of everywhere. But algorithms don't just shape what we watch, they shape what we care about. They shape who becomes visible and who stays invisible. And suddenly, I realized something that made me incredibly uncomfortable. It's possible to genuinely believe you're an ally while still living inside a bubble that's been carefully curated to look like you are an ally, to look like the entire world. Like, I don't think that is unique to me, but I think that a lot of us are walking around believing that we are incredibly open minded simply because we haven't been forced to confront the ways we've been conditioned to think. And you know what's funny? Every year during Pride Month, we hear people say the LGBTQ plus community is one big family. And I love that sentiment. I really do, but every family has issues. Don't I fucking know it? And pretending that yours doesn't is usually the fastest way to make it worse. If your sibling tells you they are hurting, you don't tell them they're wrong because Thanksgiving dinner has always felt welcoming to you. Like, you listen, you ask questions, you care enough to consider that their experience might be different from yours. You know what? I'm going to say that again because I think this can also relate to your family and our queer family and people as a whole. If someone comes to you and says that they are hurting, you do not tell them that they are wrong for hurting because Thanksgiving dinner has always felt welcoming to you. You listen, you ask questions, and you care enough to consider that their experience might be different from yours. Heated already. So why is it that when queer people of color say that they've experienced racism in our own community, some of us react like they are attacking Pride itself? They're not attacking the community. They are asking the community to be better. And we need to be. And if we expect straight people to listen when we tell them about homophobia, shouldn't we be willing to do the exact same thing when someone in the queer community tells us about racism? We can't expect other people to listen to us if we're not listening to our own. One of the biggest problems we have right now is that we've confused criticism with betrayal. Like, the second someone points out a flaw in the queer community, people immediately assume that they are trying to tear it down. Like, no, some of us criticize this community because we love it, just like we criticize the fucking government. Like, a lot of us love this country and the opportunities here, but like, the government's a fucking shit show. Like, because we know we can do better. Like, I don't make this podcast every week because I think queer culture is perfect. Like, what a bore. I make it because I care about it enough to have uncomfortable conversations, and I am so out of breath. Gosh. Bringing it back in, I've breathed. Growth does not happen because everyone sits around agreeing with each other. Growth happens because someone has the courage to say, hey, I think we have a problem and maybe we can do better. And then everyone else resists the urge to get defensive long enough to actually listen. So maybe that's where this conversation starts, right? Not with accusations, not with guilt, not with pointing fingers, but with a little humility. Because if we really believe that love is love, and if we really believe everyone deserves dignity, respect, and a place to belong, then maybe it's time we stop treating those words like a slogan and started treating them like a standard. Again, a rainbow flag doesn't automatically make a space inclusive, okay? The people standing underneath that flag, that's what makes it inclusive. And I think that's something that all of us, including me, could stand to remember. Part 3, the dating app conversation. Now, for me and any queer listeners listening, this is probably the elephant in the room, but if you are a straight person and you've never been on Grindr or seen your gay friends Grindr, some of this will come as a surprise, highly likely. Actually, it's not the elephant in the room, it's the headless, shirtless torso in the room, okay? If you've spent more than 15 minutes on Grindr, Scruff, Sniffies, Tinder, Hinge, or any dating app that gay men use, you already know exactly where I'm going with this. Dating apps have become the Wild West of human fucking behavior. They are fascinating. They're also horrifying. They are occasionally successful, but more than anything, they're like holding up a giant mirror to everything that is wrong with our community. They show us who we are when we think that nobody is watching. And spoiler alert, sometimes it's not a good look, okay? Some of you are really fucking shitty. You're bad. You're bad gays. I could not tell you how many times I've opened an app and immediately seen profiles that read like somebody accidentally copied and pasted the terms and conditions from a private white ass country club. Okay. Literally profiles that say no fats, no femmes, no Asians, no blacks, mask only, white guys only, not into older, not into this and not into that. And at some point you start wondering, like, what the fuck are you into? Like, vanilla ice cream, go eat it, bitch, and shut up. Because based on your profile, you've eliminated about 98% of the population, babe. And like, maybe you're not picky. Maybe you're just lonely and a racist and you hate yourself. Now, I was going to say before everyone starts hyperventilating, but I feel like I'm hyperventilating. But before everyone starts hyperventilating into your Stanley Cups, let me say another thing very clearly, because people love taking little clips out of context, and I will probably post that as a clip and it will be taken out of context. Like, I'm not saying that you're a bad person because you are attracted to certain people, right? Attraction isn't something that you can switch on and off like a light. And you don't owe anybody a date. You don't. You don't owe anybody sex. You don't owe anybody chemistry. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, when was the last time you actually questioned why you're attracted to who you're attracted to? Interesting topic for a future episode, because somewhere along the way, we decided that the word preference ends the conversation. It's just my preference. End of discussion. Case closed. Like, nobody's allowed to ask another question. But why? Why is attraction the one area of our lives that we're apparently not allowed to be curious about? Like, why do you only date white men? Why do you only date Asian men? Why, like, is that your avenue? And again, it's not a bad thing, but I always think, like, you could be missing out on these other beautiful opportunities, even if they're friendships. They could be romantic relationships, but like, you're really, what's that word? Like, tunnel vision in on exactly what you like. Like, the amount of people that have passed on me and literally said, sorry, but I'm only into masculine men, and like, I'm too short, or I'm too this and I'm too that, which made me very insecure for a very long time. But I'm a good person. I make good money. I have a good heart. I don't cheat. I've never cheated on a partner except my girlfriend in high school when I was like 15 years old, but like, duh, obviously, with a boy. I just kissed him. Okay. But like, so many people passed on me, and I'm glad they did, because I don't want to date people like that anyway. But so many people passed on me specifically because I wasn't masculine enough or tall enough, or they thought I was just a bottom, or made up these concepts about who I am and who I am not. And we could have been besties. We could have been great friends. We could have had a relationship. Like, who knows? But I mean, like, I'm glad they did it, because like, people like that are shitty and shallow. But you really do pass up on people that could be great additions to your life. So again, why can't we be curious about what we are attracted to? Like, think about that if you need to. Pause for a second. We spend multiple years unpacking our internalized homophobia. If you go to therapy, or if you've listened to my episode about that, we talk about how society taught us to hate feminine men. We talk about unrealistic body standards, toxic masculinity, why so many gay men think they need a six-pack before they're worthy of falling in love. Like, we acknowledge that our brains are shaped by culture all of the time, until someone asks whether race might also be part of that conversation. Then suddenly everyone becomes a neuroscientist. They're like, no, Joshua, this one is different. This one is just biology. Like, really, bitch? Is it? Because if attraction were purely biological, beauty standards wouldn't change every 10 years. We wouldn't have gone from hairless Abercrombie twinks to bearded lumberjack daddies to mustached golden retriever boyfriends in the span of about 2 fucking decades. Apparently, our DNA updates every Pride Month, actually. What's hot changes every fucking year. If it was in our DNA, it would never change. The truth is, attraction is very complicated. It is personal, absolutely, but like, it's also influenced by everything around us. The movies we watched growing up, the magazines that we flipped through, the celebrities that we had crushes on, the people who were portrayed as desirable, the people who were portrayed as dangerous, and the stereotypes we absorbed before we were even old enough to realize that we were absorbing them. Every single one of us has been influenced by culture, whether we like it or not, myself included. So why is it suddenly offensive to ask whether culture might have influenced our dating preferences too? That's not an accusation. That's just, I mean, it's just psychology. And let's be honest, because this is hot air and we're allergic to pretending here, okay? I'm itchy if I pretend sometimes. It's just a preference, gets used as a shield to avoid having an uncomfortable conversation. Like, imagine if someone walked into a bar and loudly announced, I don't date black people. Like, most of us would think, wow, you could have kept that to yourself, you little bitch. But put that exact same sentence in a dating profile, and somehow it becomes normal. Not to me, but to some people, it's normal. Like, we treat it like it's practical, it's efficient, and you're just being honest. But honesty isn't automatically kindness, is it? There's a difference between quietly knowing who you're comfortable with and compatible with and broadcasting to entire groups of people that they're disqualified before you've even exchanged a hello with them. Like, we need to stop pretending that those are the same thing. You're not doing anyone any favors. What you're doing is offending a shitload of people. And here's where I know I'm going to probably ruffle some feathers, okay? I think some of us hide behind the word preference because it's more comfortable than admitting that we might have biases we haven't unpacked yet. Like, notice how I said might, though, okay? I'm not sitting here calling every white guy on Grindr racist, although a lot of you are. That would be ridiculous, although a lot of you are. What I'm saying is that if your dating history, your celebrity crushes, your social circle, your Instagram feed, and every person you've ever found attractive all look exactly the same, and they're all white and blonde and blue eyes, like, maybe it's worth asking yourself, like, why? Maybe the answer really is just compatibility. Sure, maybe it's cultural familiarity, maybe it's coincidence, or maybe, and this is the uncomfortable one, maybe you've inherited ideas about desirability that you never stop to question because nobody ever asked you to. And growth doesn't begin with certainty, honey. It begins with curiosity. So get curious about how racist you are. Such a bitch today. I also think we've created a very bizarre culture where rejection has become transactional. Dating apps have reduced human beings to thumbnails. You swipe left in half a second. We reject people before we've even read their bio, before we've heard them laugh, before we've learned what they're passionate about, before we've discovered whether they're kind or funny or emotionally intelligent. We've become so obsessed with filtering for perfection that we've forgotten that people are more than a checklist and a profile, like height, weight, age, ethnicity, income, distance, body type, HIV status, too, position. We filter and filter and filter until we're left wondering why dating feels so superficial, because we've turned people into Amazon search results. Like, we did this to ourselves. And maybe that's the bigger issue. Dating apps didn't invent bias. They amplified it. They gave us permission to say the quiet parts out loud because there's a screen between us and another human being. Things people would never dream of saying face to face suddenly become perfectly acceptable because they are hidden behind a profile picture and a username like Mask for Mass 69. Like, technology didn't create prejudice, though, right? Like, it just made it more fucking visible. And let me tell you, I obviously don't have the dating apps anymore because I'm in a relationship. But when I did, I can look at your headless torso and I know exactly who you are because I have like a little bit of a photographic memory that like only works for men's bodies, I think. So like your head could not be in your picture, but I could see your body and be like, I've seen that body on Instagram before and it had a head and I remember who it is and I just see their screen name and I also know I've seen you at the gym and then I know you're a fucking racist because your profile says no blacks, no Asians, no femmes, mass for mass. Like, a lot of you out there and you know who you are. I hope some of you are listening. Like, I know who you are. So as I said, I'm not here to police who you are attracted to. Like, that actually sounds really exhausting. But what I am asking is whether we become way too comfortable accepting our preferences as fixed and like unquestionable facts instead of recognizing that we are all products of a world that we grew up in, and the world that we all grew up in is pretty racist. Like, let's be real. Because if we've learned anything as queer people, it's that the stories society tells us about who is lovable and desirable, masculine, feminine, worthy, or quote unquote normal are not always true. We challenge those stories about our sexuality. We challenge them about our gender. We challenge them about our bodies. And maybe, just a maybe, we should have the courage to ask whether there are a few more stories we've accepted without realizing it. And if that makes you uncomfortable, well, good. This episode is not here to hand you answers, okay? It's here to ask the questions that we don't ask ourselves nearly enough. Part 4. The gay community has a beauty problem and race is part of it. Now, let's zoom out a little bit because I don't actually think dating apps are the problem. Like, they're a big problem, but not the problem. I think they are the symptom. They're just a place where we say the quiet part out loud. The real issue starts long before anyone downloads Grindr for the first time. It starts with the images we consume, the people we celebrate, the influencers we elevate, the bodies that we reward, and the faces we decide represent queer culture. If you really want to understand what a community values, do not listen to what it says. Look at who it puts on the pedestal. Look at who gets the magazine covers. Look at who gets the brand deals. Look at who becomes the face of pride campaigns. And look at who algorithms decide is worthy of 1 million followers. Look at who gets invited on the influencer trips, who gets cast in underwear campaigns, who becomes the it boy every fucking summer. We love to tell ourselves that the queer community celebrates diversity, but sometimes I wonder if what we actually celebrate is a very specific version of diversity that still fits neatly inside conventional beauty standards. And listen, again, before somebody messages me saying some crazy shit like Joshua, there are tons of successful queer creators of color. Yes, duh. There absolutely are. That's not the point I'm making, okay? I'm mad at you and you haven't even sent me a letter yet. I'm asking you to look at the bigger picture. Like, who dominates the conversation? It's fucking Bradley Cooper lookalikes everywhere, okay? Who gets pushed to the front? Who do brands consistently choose when they're trying to sell us aspirational gay lifestyle? It's always a guy with a fat ass and a six pack. It's usually someone who checks a very familiar list of boxes. They are young, conventionally attractive, fit, masculine, stylish, socially connected. They're usually spending a lot of time in Fire Island with their daddy. They're financially comfortable, and yes, very often white. Not always, but very often they're white, and that is worth noticing. The queer community did not invent beauty standards. We inherited them from the broader culture, but we've certainly perfected them. We took society's impossible expectations and somehow made them even more impossible. Like, congratulations, everyone. We really outdid ourselves here. Like, no wonder it takes us all so long to feel confident and good in our own skin. Like, I think about Fire Island every summer because the internet treats it like the gay promised land. Scroll through social media, June, July. I mean, I've seen so many just today alone. It's the same montage over and over. Perfectly tanned, tiny swimwear, designer sunglasses, that beach house with the pride flag that costs more than most people will earn in a decade. Like, everybody looks like they just walked off the set of a Calvin Klein campaign. And you see those groups of people that are all white. Like, why do they not have any friends that are of a different race? It blows my mind. And in fairness, for a long time, well, I've always had friends that are different races, but like, I think, like, I don't have a black friend that lives in San Diego. Gosh, I hope I don't. What if I'm forgetting that I'm such a piece of shit? But like, my friend group, Hispanic, Asian, Italian. I mean, Italian's Caucasian, but you know what I mean. And then there's me. I'm like the token white person in my group. I have trans friends. I have straight friends. I at least surround myself now with a little bit more diversity. Could I use more? Yes. But anyway, bringing it back to Fire Island, okay? I'm not criticizing anyone for looking hot. Like, do you, boo? If I had abs that you could grate Parmesan cheese on, I would be naked every day on Instagram. Surely. Like, that's not the issue. The issue is when those images become the definition of what queer success looks like. And that prevents me from being naked on Instagram every day because I think that I'll only be successful if I have a 6-pack or an 8-pack. Like, come on. Those Fire Island 6-pack mask for mask gays become the standard. They quietly tell people, like, this is who belongs. This is who gets attention. This is who is desired. This is bullshit. Okay, if you don't see yourself in that picture, whether it's because of your race, your body, your age, your desirability, your gender expression, or your bank account is a big fucking one here. It doesn't take very long before you start wondering if maybe you don't belong there at all. And frankly, that's probably part of the reason I haven't gone to Fire Island, because I kind of feel like I don't belong. I'm not a rich as fuck, like, big, tall, mask for mask gay. I'm gonna have to starve myself for at least a year before I go there, because I guess I'm in the same boat. I probably would just feel like shit if I went there. And a very similar thing, kind of the same thing happens with circuit culture. And again, no judgment if that is your scene. Like, go dance, go have fun, live your life. But let's not pretend those spaces don't often reinforce a very particular hierarchy of attractiveness. It's almost like we built our own little gay version of high school where there are still popular kids and little cliques here and there. Cliques? Why am I saying that weird? Like, there's still people who get waved past the velvet rope while everybody else waits outside, wondering why they suddenly feel 16 again. And that's what's so ironic about all of this, but everything. Many of us spent our teenage years feeling excluded. We know exactly what it's like to stand on the outside looking in. Then we finally find queer spaces, and somehow we've created the exact same social structures we spent years trying to escape. Like a different setting, same insecurity. And the people that are running the show are usually the gay men who could probably pass for being straight because they are masculine and they have beards and body hair and they're tall and they're fucking white. We are literally recreating the problem, people. Like, I want to see a plus size black trans woman as our fucking ringleader. Like, come on, let's change it up a little bit. I'm so fucking over all you boring ass white motherfuckers with your six packs. Like, I'm done. I'm so done. I'm turning this episode off. I'm done. Stop recording. Obviously, the episode's not done. So another thing that really fascinates me is how often we confuse visibility with equality. Because every Pride Month, inevitably someone is like, look how diverse this campaign is. And like, sure enough, there's one black model, one Asian model, one Latino model, one plus size model, somebody in a wheelchair, and everyone pats themselves on the back because the diversity checklist has been checklisted. It's complete. But representation isn't just about who's standing in a picture. It's about who gets centered, who gets the close-up. Like a group of 20 people that are of every part of the rainbow, that's not diversity. Like, who becomes the face that people remember? Who gets invited back next year? Diversity isn't a casting decision. It's a culture. And sometimes I think we become so obsessed with looking inclusive that we've stopped asking whether people actually feel included once the cameras are turned off. I also think this obsession with appearance has become one of the biggest mental health issues facing gay men today. And we do not talk about it. I was going to say nearly enough, but like basically not at all. We talk about anxiety here and there, depression here and there, loneliness, but we don't always talk about what is feeding those things. Imagine spending years believing that once you came out, life would get easier. And it does, okay? You finally find your community, only to realize you've entered another competition. You got to lip sync for your life, okay? Now it's about your body, your face, your age, your clothes, your followers, your vacation photos, your apartment, your salary, your skincare routine. And suddenly you're out of breath, but you're also suddenly you've traded one set of impossible expectations for another. And if you're also navigating racism on top of all of that, that is a weight that many of us will never understand. The other stuff I can relate to, but I will never fully understand what it is like to be a black gay man, obviously. But what I find really interesting, we often say things like the gay community is so superficial. I mean, it is, but like almost like it's a joke, right? We laugh about it. We make memes about it. We shrug our shoulders and say, like, that's just how gay men are. But why do we accept that? Why do we accept that? Seriously, like, why have we normalized it? Imagine if every straight dating space openly celebrated exclusion and perfectionism, like status and appearance to the extent that some queer spaces do. We'd be saying that those straight spaces are toxic, and we would be right. Yet when it happens in our own community, we act like it's just part of the culture. Like, maybe it doesn't have to be. Hello. And here is where I also want to challenge myself as much as I think I'm challenging you. Every single one of us participates in this culture in some way, okay? Me included. I am not, off the hook here. I've absolutely judged people too quickly. I've made assumptions based on appearance. I've walked into a room and gravitated toward people who look familiar or felt comfortable for me. Like, none of us are exempt from being influenced by the world around us. The difference is whether we are willing to recognize it, because the moment we convince ourselves that we're above the bias is usually the exact moment we're least likely to notice it. And the reason I keep coming back throughout this episode to Nolan Wells isn't because I'm trying to solve his case, although I wish I could. Like, I can't. None of us can. But his story forced me to ask questions that had nothing to do with the investigation specifically and everything to do with the world that we live in. It made me think about whose stories we amplify, whose pain captures our attention, whose faces become recognizable, and whose disappear quietly from the news cycle. It made me wonder whether our community sometimes celebrates diversity in theory more than we practice it in reality. And maybe that's the uncomfortable truth sitting underneath this entire conversation. We don't become inclusive simply because we know what exclusion feels like. We become inclusive when we actively choose to challenge our own assumptions, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it bruises our ego, and even when it forces us to admit that we still have work to do. Because if we're serious about building a community, like I'm fucking serious, where everyone belongs, then belonging can't stop at the edge of a rainbow flag. It has to extend into our dating lives, our friendships, our nightlife, the media, businesses, and even the standards of beauty that we have spent far too long pretending are just the way things are. Part 5. What do we actually do about it? So, yes, what do we actually do with all of this information? Like, if you've listened this far, good fucking job. And you're expecting me to end this episode by saying, like, let's all just be nicer to each other. Like, I'm sorry. That's not how it's going to end, okay? Like, that's the kind of vague, feel-good advice that people post over a sunset photo on Instagram before going right back to doing absolutely nothing differently. Like, be kind. Great. Thanks, Karen. Ground fucking breaking, okay? We all know we should try and be kind. The question is, what does that actually look like when nobody is watching? What does inclusion look like when it isn't Pride Month? What does allyship look like when there is not a rainbow logo, there's no protest to go to, and there's like no hashtag telling you exactly what to do? So this actually couldn't have come at a better time since Pride Month just ended. Like, here's what I've realized over the past few weeks, okay? I don't think racism in the queer community is usually very loud. It's rarely somebody screaming slurs in the middle of a gay bar. Like, that's easy to identify. That is easy to condemn. The stuff that concerns me is much quieter than that. It's who gets invited and who doesn't. Pretty simple. It's whose messages get answered on dating apps and whose get ignored before you've even looked at their profile. It's who gets introduced to your friends. It's who gets assumed to be your type and who gets dismissed before they've opened their mouth. And also, if your type is solely based on someone's physical characteristics, you're going to be fucking alone forever, bitch. I'm looking at you. If you're listening and you're like, oof, that's me, I am talking to you. If you base your type and what you like only on someone's height and skin color and their hair color and their eye color and whether they're masculine or not, and your preference has nothing to do with personality and what someone brings to the table, you're going to be alone forever. You're going to keep going through shitty ass fucking relationships and you will die alone, okay? Because your type should be about trust, about communication, about what hobbies you have in common. I could go on and on and on, but perhaps I'll save that for another episode. I'm just saying, if you're one of those bitches who's mask for mask only and you don't like people that are of color and you only want to date white men and that's it, that's where your standard ends, good luck in your old age home by yourself. So again, bringing it back to the way that, like, you know, racism shows up in our community in these different ways that are not so loud. It's something like you're walking into a gay space and realizing that everyone somehow looks exactly the same, white, while we continue telling ourselves we're the most inclusive community on the fucking planet or in the solar system. Like, racism doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just quietly shapes our decisions over and over again until those decisions become culture. And again, before somebody says, like, Joshua, you're making people feel guilty or you're talking shit about us, like, let me stop you right there, okay? Guilt is actually, I mean, it's a pretty useless emotion. It does not build anything, okay? It usually just makes people defensive. I'm not interested in making anyone feel guilty. I'm interested in making people curious. And curious people ask questions. Defensive people stop listening. So probably some of you might have stopped listening. And if this episode has done anything, I hope it made you curious enough to examine parts of yourself that maybe you've never examined before, because that's all any of us can do, right? I can't change the entire queer community. You cannot either as one person, but we can change ourselves. And that's where culture actually begins. It doesn't begin with governments and it doesn't begin with corporations. It begins with individuals making slightly different choices over and over and over. And I think it's easy for us all to just decide to be less fucking racist. Okay. So here's my challenge, not just to you, but to myself too. The next time you and I catch ourselves saying, they're just not my type. Pause for a second. I mean, I'm not going to say that because I'm dating someone, but like, you know what I mean? Not because you're wrong, not because you owe anybody attraction, but because maybe it's worth asking yourself, like, why? Why are they just not your type or they are your type? And don't give yourself the lazy answer, okay? Don't immediately jump to it's just a preference. Like, dig fucking deeper. Come on. Or deeper than that. Like, where did that preference come from? Has it always been there? Was it shaped by the media that you consumed? Was it shaped by where you grew up or who was considered attractive in your circle? Like by stereotypes you never consciously chose, but still inherited. You might come to the exact same conclusion that you started with. Fine. But at least you'll know you got there honestly instead of simply accepting something because it had never been questioned. It's just like saying like, oh, why do I always run late? It's just because, no, bitch, there's a fucking reason you're always late. So figure it out and get your shit together and be on time. Like, it's very simple. And I also think we need to get a whole lot better at listening without immediately preparing our defense. This is something I have worked on myself. Case in point, boyfriend telling me that some of my episodes are boring. They are, okay? Some of them are boring. Some he really likes. Some have some good lessons in them. Some not so much. Like, I'm aware, but like normally I would get defensive to somebody criticizing my art, whether it's in a good way or a negative way. But like, I was open to reworking this episode, and I think it was for the better. I didn't get defensive at all. So pat on my fucking back. So instead of preparing your defense, like when someone tells you they've experienced racism in queer spaces, like our instinct shouldn't be to become the community's lawyer. We don't have to cross-examine them. We don't have to explain away their experience. We don't have to respond with like, well, that's never happened to me. Well, of course it hasn't because you're probably fucking white, just like I am. Like that's kind of the point, right? If someone tells you they felt invisible in a room where you felt completely comfortable, maybe the lesson isn't that they are wrong. Maybe the lesson is that two people can walk into the exact same space and have completely different experiences. There can be 100 people in the room and one person, no, I'm not going to do it. Okay. We talk all the time about believing queer people when they tell us about homophobia. I say it all the time. Like, just believe us. It happens. Maybe we should extend that same courtesy when queer people of color tell us about racism. And while we're at it, maybe it's time we stop treating criticism like it's an attack. Honestly, like one of the things that frustrates me most about internet culture is that everyone seems to think there are only two opinions. Either something is perfect or you hate it. There's no room in the middle anymore. Apparently, you can't love your community and challenge it at the same time, or love your country and challenge it at the same time. Like, I reject that idea. I love the queer community. This community gave me the confidence to start this podcast, become who I am, express myself. It gave me friendships I'll have for hopefully the rest of my life. It gave me chosen family, spaces where I finally feel understood. And like, that's exactly why it's worth having conversations like this. You don't criticize something because you want to destroy it. You criticize it because you believe that it can be better. And if I didn't care about this community, I wouldn't spend an hour something talking about it every single week with my air conditioning turned off so the sound sounds good in Southern California in the middle of July where I have a sweat mustache and I feel like my face is going to melt off. Like, come on. And that right there is the takeaway from the episode. No, the biggest takeaway from today's episode is that this conversation, although it started about Nolan Wells, it was never just about that. His story is what brought me here. And it isn't obviously where this conversation ends. Like, I don't know what the investigators will figure out with that whole thing, but maybe they'll answer every question. Maybe they'll uncover new ones. Maybe years from now we'll look back and we're going to look back at it very differently than we do today. Like, I have no idea, right? I've kind of put that aside so I could really figure out how this was best for Hot Air. What I do know is that, his story forced me to ask questions I probably should have been asking a long time ago, like before this case was on my news feed, before his name was on my news feed. Like, it forced me to think about whose stories that I pay attention to. It forced me to think about the voices that I amplify. It forced me to think about whether our community sometimes confuses good intentions with meaningful action. And honestly, I think I needed this wake up call. I think it really inspired me to dig a little deeper. So, if this episode made you uncomfortable, as I always say, good. I mean that sincerely, good. Some of the most important shifts in my own life started with a conversation that made me uncomfy. Growth is rarely convenient. It usually starts with someone saying something you'd rather not hear. And if your first reaction today was to disagree with me, that's okay too. But you're probably part of the problem. No, I'm just kidding. That's okay too if you don't agree with me. You don't have to agree with everything I said, but I hope before you dismiss everything I said, you might sit with it for a little while. Like, ask yourself why it made you uncomfortable. Ask yourself which part you reacted to the strongest, because sometimes the thing we resist the hardest is the thing that is asking us to grow the most. And at the end of the day, I don't think the queer community needs to become perfect. That doesn't exist. That's impossible. I think we just need to become a little bit more honest enough to admit that we still have blind spots, honest enough to acknowledge that inclusion is something we practice, not something that we simply claim. Maybe honest enough to recognize that waving a rainbow flag is easy, but living up to what that flag represents is the hard part. And if we're going to ask the rest of the world to see us for who we truly are, then we owe it to ourselves to make sure that we're doing the same thing for everyone who walks through our own doors. Because love is love shouldn't be the slogan we print on the t-shirt. It should be the standard that we hold ourselves to long after Pride Month is over. And I think we're certainly capable of that. The only question is whether we're willing to do the work. And inclusion isn't something we get to claim simply because we've experienced exclusion ourselves. We have to practice this every single day. And the story of Nolan Xavier Wells reminded me that some conversations are much bigger than one headline. It challenged me to think differently about race and representation and the assumptions that we make, not just as individuals, but as a community that has built its identity around acceptance. And while I don't pretend to have all the answers, although I am a Leo, I sometimes think that I do have all the answers because, I think I'm kind of a genius. But I do believe we have a responsibility to keep asking better questions and more questions. And I know that today's episode may have made some people uncomfortable. Again, I kind of hope that it did, not because I enjoy stirring the pot, but I do enjoy stirring the pot. Although, yeah, sometimes I do enjoy stirring the pot, but because the conversations that make us most uncomfortable are often the ones that have the greatest potential to help us change and grow. Now, because this episode was, so I feel like this episode could bring about a lot of important conversations. So I would genuinely love to hear what you thought about today's conversation. If you agreed or disagreed, did this episode make you think about something differently? Let's keep the convo going. And also share your experiences with me, how you experienced racism within the community. I should really do another listener story episode soon. And I think this would be a great topic to, continue the conversation. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram and TikTok at _hotairpod. Visit my website, hotairrobert.com, to shop my merch, submit your listener stories and topic suggestions. And of course, if you enjoyed today's episode, I would really appreciate it if you would leave a rating or subscribe wherever you're listening, or leave a little like or comment or share it with somebody. All those things. It helps more than you know. I'll beg forever. It helps Hot Air grow. Some weeks I'm kicking ass and other weeks I'm I should just retire, but I'm not going anywhere. Okay. Thank you so much for listening, spending part of your day with me. Take care of yourselves. Take care of our fucking community. Take care of queer Black people, and stop taking care of the 6'3" white mask for mask bitches. Okay. I'm so sick of that. I'm going to end there. I'm going to say something really terrible, but I will see you next Tuesday.
HOTAIR, hot takes therapy, no filter. Say what I mean. HOTAIR, let's be real. You're listening to Hot Air.